Sunday morning for this year anyway. So thanks for coming. I'm going to do a little tiny bit of review so you can know that what we've talked about this whole series. First and foremost, science confirms biblical creation, and that's the main point of all of this. And the Bible even says all the time things like, "For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." That's a really important verse when you're talking about creation, like origin of the cell, right? God created it. He even says he did. Okay, in Genesis 1:1, everyone knows this verse, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Okay, also in John it says, "All things were made by him." All throughout you can find scriptures that say that God created everything. Okay, God is outside of time, right, in the beginning. So he's outside of time, space, matter. He's not a part of it, which is why he can create it. If he was a God that was inside the creation, he couldn't create it. That doesn't make sense. Okay, the Genesis 3 attack. This is a very important command. Geological evidence shows there was a worldwide flood. Absolutely indicates that. In fact, a lot of the scientists now are coming up with what they're calling neo-catastrophism, where they're like, well, there was a catastrophe here in this location, but they'll refuse to say it was a global flood, even though that's all the indications of it. Okay, and the different ways to add millions of years to the Bible, which was what I did, I thought, well, okay, science has proven evolution in millions of years. When I was in graduate school, this is what I thought. I never really delved into it and researched and studied it. But every time you do that, no matter how you do it, you're always putting death before sin. So you're canceling out the gospel message completely without even knowing it. Okay, you can't have millions of years of death and people were created out of death. That's their evolutionary story. Okay, so if you cancel out the 6 days of creation and the flood, you're actually changing the entire rest of the Bible. That is super, super important to understand. Okay, we shouldn't be surprised, as we have seen this whole series, that God's world agrees exactly with God's word. Okay, we talked about the sediment layers that are across whole continents. We talked about folded rock, that folded when it was still wet. There's no indication that these rocks are cracked. They were folded. Evolutionary scenarios and millions of years cannot explain that folded rock. Okay, Noah's Ark, we talked about how you could get all the different kinds of animals on there easy peasy. You can go see the Ark. They've recreated it in Kentucky. Okay, the fossil order, the fossil record, is an order of burial. It does not line up with the theory of evolution of one thing evolving into many different things. Okay, that tree of life is just made up. There's no evidence for it anywhere, not in the fossil record, not in the DNA studies that they're doing. There is no evidence, none, zero evidence that that tree of life is real. The evidence shows created kinds, and that's what we would expect. So remember all the fossil frauds I showed you, ape man to humans, never happens, never. Okay, radiometric dating, we talked about this. And we talked about trying to validate the method. And so they take something of known age, and they use these dating methods, and they get wildly different ages. Okay, Mount St. Helens, rocks that are 6 years old when they dated them were 2.8 million years old. And this is the dating method that proves evolution. Carbon-14 dating. Anything with carbon in it can't be more than 50 to 80,000. I've seen different ages where there's no detectable carbon-14 left in it. Very important to know that. So something that says carbon-14 dated millions of years, that's just a total fabrication. Okay, excuse me, nothing evolved everything from nothing, contradicts all of these different laws, proven laws of science. Okay, you cannot have nothing creating something. We talked about that in depth in The Origin of Life. Okay, if you remember Dr. James Tour, he's the guy that you need to go listen to if you're interested in the chemistry that has to do with this. Okay, it's obvious that nothing can't create anything. Okay, it contradicts just plain reason, logic. Okay, in 1 Thessalonians it says, but test all things carefully so you can recognize what is good. This is the Amplified Version. Hold firmly to that which is good. So when you hear something, be like the Bereans, test it, think about it, use your mind. God tells us to use logic and use our minds to test things, think about them, hold fast to what is good, that's the Bible, and think about what you're hearing and reading. Okay, natural selection is a downward progression of information. We talked about that. First of all, how nature can't select anything, right? It's mindless, just random chance mutations. You cannot have evolution. Even if you have the first cell, you can't have evolution because you need to add information, which is DNA. Okay, so this doesn't work. Evolution requires the addition of more and more information. Okay, that's what DNA is showing. So today we're talking about astronomy. We're going to talk about what is the Big Bang, star formation, light years, the James Webb Space Telescope, what is it showing, spiral galaxies, comets, planets, our solar system. So we have a lot to get through. In Jeremiah it says, O sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. Okay, the size of the universe, you can't even comprehend it. Okay, things are massively big. We have no way to understand that with our human brain. Okay, the Big Bang is the secular reason for how everything started. They have to come up with a way to get God out of the start of everything. So they come up with this idea. Okay, there's a lot of problems. We're just going to go through a few of them. Okay, lots and lots of scientific problems with the Big Bang that even people who purport the Big Bang know that these are problems. Okay, first of all, before we go farther, you have to kind of remember your periodic table. These first three elements, 1, 2, and 3, hydrogen, helium, and lithium, those are the things that the Big Bang created. That's what they say. They created those first three elements because they can't get the Big Bang to create all of them. Okay, and I don't know if you know this, but the periodic table changes. When I was in school, it didn't look like this. They keep finding more elements that they add to it. Okay, it's just a matter of what they're finding. But keep in mind that these first three is what the Big Bang created, and all the other ones, how did they get there? Okay, that is a problem. We'll get into that. So here's the Big Bang theory of evolution. It's naturalistic, first of all. It's atheistic in its origin. That was the intention of the Big Bang. The universe began in a tiny, infinitely hot point. Keep that in mind, that it was infinitely hot because it's pure energy. Singularity, they call it. All matter, even space itself, everything. So it's not like you have space and you have a point of something. No, there's nothing. This is their theory. Then the energy cooled down as the universe expanded, and some of it turned into matter. So that singularity explodes. It's infinitely hot energy. It explodes. Some of it turns into hydrogen and helium. And then a little bit of lithium, number 3, they say. Then those gases collapse to form stars and galaxies of stars. Hydrogen, helium, tiny bit of lithium collapse to form the stars. The stars explode to create all the other elements because they don't know how the elements got there. So they're like, oh, well, the Big Bang created the stars and the stars took care of the rest. And you'll hear, well, we're just stardust. That's where that comes from, is they believe the stars exploded to create all of these other elements. This is the story you're told. Okay, and then those heavier elements that were created by the exploding stars kind of began to stick together and create the planets and all of the other things we see. Okay, now this is in complete opposition to the biblical account. Notice the order of things. Okay, God created the earth on day 1, out of water by water, it says. It wasn't till day 4 that he created the sun and the stars and the moon and all of those things. Okay, the Big Bang starts with the stars, and then eventually you get to the earth. Okay, just the fact that the earth is supposedly from a hot molten volcano, all of this, that's how the earth formed. God created it out of water on day 1. Okay, and he took, 6 days making it perfect for us. Okay, so Big Bang problems. First of all, we all know it's scientifically impossible for nothing to create everything. That violates the laws of physics. Okay, the first law of physics, if you remember this from school, energy can't be created or destroyed. It's a law of physics. Testable, repeatable science shows that the first law of thermodynamics is true. Okay? The second law is entropy, and that just means the amount of disorder in something. Okay, that increases with time. The amount of disorder increases with time. You buy a brand new car, entropy happens, right? Rust, okay? People were breaking down. The older you get, things break down, okay? Entropy happens. The universe as a whole is going from order to disorder, okay? Now you got to think, the Big Bang went from, remember that tiny little point, it explodes. So that's chaos. And then everything gets ordered perfectly. That goes against laws of physics, okay? Some people will say that the universe can be eternal, that it's always been here. Well, that doesn't make sense at all. No, I don't think a lot of people hold to that view anymore, because if it's always been here, it would be in complete disorder. There would be no more energy. It would be completely flat. That's the physics of it. Okay, so it cannot be an eternal universe. In Romans 8, it says, the creation waits in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay. This is, I believe, indicative of everything's decaying, okay? Things are running down. This makes perfect sense with the science that we know. Okay, things are not getting better. More problems. There's something called monopoles. Think of like North Pole, South Pole, like in a magnet. Okay, monopoles would be just one of those. Okay, and particle physicists claim that the Big Bang should have created magnetic monopoles due to the infinitely hot initial conditions. So if you have something that's infinitely hot, meaning you can't measure the temperature, they can't put a temperature on it because it's hotter than anything, when that supposedly exploded, it should have created lots of monopoles also in the universe. Everything they look at has a north and south pole, and these monopoles are super stable. When they would have been created, they would have been super stable. They wouldn't have broken down, so they can't use that argument that, well, it's been 13 billion years, they're all gone. No, these physicists know that the monopoles are super stable and we should still see them out there in the universe, okay? Where are the monopoles? Big Bang can't explain it. Okay, there's something called the baryon number problem, and this is just talking about like the protons and neutrons in the atoms. The Big Bang should produce equal amounts of matter and antimatter, because they can do this. They take particle accelerators and put like a little bit of energy in it, do the thing, and they create matter and antimatter every time. Well, when matter and antimatter come into contact with each other, they degrade each other. Okay, there is no antimatter. The universe is all matter. The Big Bang should have matter and antimatter, because that is what is created when you take energy and blast it like the Big Bang purports it does. Okay, all reactions where energy is transformed into matter produce exactly equal amounts of matter and antimatter. Okay, both should have been created in equal amounts in the Big Bang. Big problem for the Big Bang, right? If someone believes in the Big Bang and is trying to convince you, raise your hand. Where's the antimatter? Where are the monopoles? These are some things that you could ask them. Okay? Nothing can exist without God, the creator of all things, right? There are more problems with the Big Bang, but I just chose a couple for time's sake. There simply isn't any good reason to believe in the Big Bang. It's not compatible with the Bible, first of all, and it's not good science, okay? So to believe in the Big Bang in millions of years, it's not logical. The science kind of has disproven it. There's a lot of resources out there that you can look more into it. Okay, we're going to move on to stars. In Psalm, throughout the Bible, there's a lot of verses about the stars. But by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, their starry host by the breath of his mouth. For he spoke, and it came to be. That's all God had to do was speak, because his word is that powerful to make the stars. Okay, so let's look at star formation theory. Here is a quote about how stars form. Given the right special conditions, it may be possible for a cloud of hydrogen to become a star. If it is first compressed to the right density so that the force of gravity is more powerful than the tendency for it to disperse, it will then collapse, and the resultant heating of its interior should eventually ignite the process of thermonuclear fusion thought to power stars. Okay, when I'm teaching my students, these green boxes are things that, like, this is not science. It may be possible. If this happens, it should eventually do this because we think this. Those are like fuzzy magic words. They're not science. They're not observable science. Okay, and this is star formation theory. Because remember, they're starting with hydrogen and helium, and they have to get that to collapse in on itself to become a star. Okay, there's three main things why this can't happen. Gas expands. Okay, everybody knows gas expands. Okay, you learned this in, I don't know, kindergarten, right? Gas expands out, right? The amount of oxygen here is the same as way over there in the corner. Gas is expanding out. Okay, gas does not tend to collapse in on itself to create a star. Okay, there's pressure pushing these particles apart, and it's greater than the gravity that supposedly is pulling them together. So gas expands. You guys all know gas expands. Okay. Gas has a weak magnetic field. Okay, remember, just like North Pole, South Pole, all these gas particles have a very weak magnetic field, meaning just like if you take two magnets and you try to put them together, north end to north end, you know, you can kind of feel it doesn't want to go together. Okay, same kind of thing happens with these little gas particles, so they're kind of repelling each other. Okay, so it doesn't want to clump together. Another big problem for the star formation theory. And then there's something called angular momentum. These little particles have some motion to them. So this gas cloud that supposedly is, you know, out there trying to condense in on itself has a little bit of angular momentum to it, so it's kind of spinning a little bit. Okay, well, when you do that and you're spinning it a little bit, it tends to repel out. That's what angular momentum is. It's pushing the gas back out. So these three problems, they can't overcome. So they say there was a shock wave from a supernova explosion, because that's how you get the shock wave from these stars that explode, which are called supernovas, can compress a gas cloud so it contracts to form a star. And this is their theory, how stars are formed. Do you guys see a problem with that? Well, right, there's a lot of problems. It's a chicken and egg problem. So stars exploded to create the stars because that's what you need is a shock wave from an exploding star. Well, where were the first stars? How were they made? Okay. In 1 Corinthians, it says the star has one kind of splendor, the moon another, and the stars another. And star differs from star in splendor. There's lots of different kinds of stars out there. How do we know that? Because in 1 Corinthians, it says it, right? So there's lots of different kinds of stars. They classify them, and they call them population 1, 2, and 3. Okay, it's by the amount of heavy elements, which is everything else besides hydrogen, helium, and lithium. Everything else is called heavy elements. Okay, and they supposedly correlates to their age. It doesn't correlate to their age. It just says what's in them. That's all it says. There's a little bit of carbon in this star. It doesn't say how old it is. Okay? And they came up with the names population 1, 2, and 3 because population 1, they saw those stars, they put them in a category. Oh, those are all the population 1s. Okay. Population 2, they have all of these elements in them. Okay? Population 3 stars, even though they're the last one numbered, they technically should have been the first ones created in the Big Bang because those are the ones that would only have hydrogen, helium, and maybe a little bit of lithium. Okay, those are called population 3 stars. You can remember that because there's 3 things supposedly in them. Okay, so these population 3 stars should be out there, right? Because that's what the Big Bang created. Okay, it would produce only the population 3 stars. And then those population 3 stars explode to make all the other heavier elements. This is their story. Okay. Population 3 stars made the heavier elements in their cores as they exploded. That's their story. Okay, they are missing. They haven't seen them. They should still be around today since their potential lifespan is calculated to exceed the 13.8 billion years, the supposed age of the universe. Okay, how did they get that 13.8 billion years? I didn't tell you that. So they take the expansion rate of the universe and they work it backwards. Because remember, their model is uniformitarianism, where everything's been going on the same way it's been going on forever, right? So they take it back, and then at 13.8 billion years, it would have all been at the same place. That's how they come up with that number, okay? The galaxy alone has an estimated 100 billion stars, just our galaxy. I'm going to show you how many galaxies are out there. Well, actually, I'm not because nobody knows. Not one star in just our galaxy is a population 3 star. Out of 100 billion stars, there's not one of these population 3 stars. Okay, where are they? Where are the monopoles? Where's the antimatter? Where are the population 3 stars? Just a few problems. In Isaiah, it says, lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. That just shows you how incredibly big God is. Like, beyond our comprehension, billions and billions of stars. Everyone has its name. Not one is missing. God created all of them. Okay, there are blue stars in the universe. And these blue stars, they say it's kind of like the SUV of the star world. Okay, they're gas guzzlers. They're huge, but they use a lot of gas. So their lifespan is not going to be as much as a little Toyota that gets good gas mileage. Okay, they're going to burn through their fuel very, very quickly and die out. There are lots and lots and lots of blue stars. Everywhere you look, there's blue stars in the universe. This indicates a young universe. Okay, blue stars are an indication of a young universe. Okay, now we're going to talk about starlight. How do you get light here from a star that's 10 million miles away in 6,000 years? Okay, first of all, the speed of light is a measure of distance, not time. Okay, they're measuring distance, not time. Okay, the distance light travels in 1 year is 5.88 trillion miles. Okay, they also break it down to per second because that is supposedly what's measured, 186,000 miles per second. Okay, from the photon's point of view, think about it this way. It takes no time at all to get from the galaxy to the Earth. And we're going to explain why that can be. There is something that, let's do this first. Space, time, and light are very complicated. Okay, Einstein has discovered this, that time is affected by motion and gravity. Okay, at the speed of light, time doesn't flow. So if you could travel at the speed of light, would you not get older? I don't understand that. But if you take two clocks and you synchronize them to be exactly the same time, you move them, they get unsynchronized. Okay, there's something about motion and gravity that affects that. Okay, and light does not experience time. Okay, this is all part of to get starlight here. So Dr. Jason Lisle has come up with, I think, a great reason for how starlight can get here. This is a creationist coming up with something scientific, and it cannot be disproven. Okay? He has a book called The Physics of Einstein, if you're interested in this. It's kind of a layman's version of how starlight gets here, basically. Okay, anisotropic just means different in different directions. Okay, light can travel differently in different directions. That's the anisotropic. Okay, synchrony convention just means it's something that we all agree on. Okay, there's no law of nature that says there's 12 inches in a foot. Right? We just all agree, okay, 12 inches in a foot. You know, the metric system is actually a lot easier, right? Tens and hundreds, you can understand that. But why is there 12 inches in a foot? And we all agree to it, okay? The speed of light is the same kind of convention. It's something that has never been measured. The one-way speed of light has never been measured. Think about that, okay? If you're going to measure the speed of light, you could take a flashlight, take a mirror, and turn the flashlight on. It hits the mirror, comes back, you can measure that, okay? If you could make a hallway 186,000 miles long, you could take your light and there's a mirror at the end of it, and you could time it, and you get 2 seconds, okay? How do you know that the light going from here to the end of the hallway was 1 second, and coming back was 1 second? You don't know that. It can't be measured. You just divide by 2 and assume that it goes out and comes back at the same rate. Okay, by convention, it travels 186,000 miles per second. No one can determine the one-way speed of light. Now, this is like a 15-minute video. Obviously, I don't have time to show it to you, but I very, very highly recommend you watch this video. Why no one has measured the speed of light. Just Google why no one has measured the speed of light, and you're going to come up with this video that explains it, because you need to know the speed of light to measure the speed of light. That's basically how it goes, okay? You could take radio waves and do it that way, but radio waves travel at the speed of light, and there's calculations involved. So everyone says, you know what? It works. 186,000 miles per second. It works in our math, so we're just going to go with it. 12 inches in a foot. It works when you're doing the math. We're just going to go with it, okay? However, in Genesis it says, God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. And this is day 4. So day 4, God creates the light in the stars and the suns, and it was so. Immediately the light was here. Adam was not created till day 6, but let's say, on day 7, he looks up and he sees the stars. He didn't have to wait millions and billions of years for the light to get there. Remember, the speed of light is a distance. It's not time. It is a distance that light has traveled. And light travels so quickly that you have to measure it that way. Okay? Think about it logically. When you see something happen, you think it happens right then when you see it. When you see a supernova explode in the sky, there have been documented supernovas. They've seen them explode. They write the date down. That is when the thing exploded. Because light, and this will make more sense when you watch that video, light gets here instantaneously. Okay, it doesn't take millions of years. And how do we know that? First of all, because it makes logic sense that when you see something happening, you think it happened right then and there. Okay, otherwise you would see a supernova explode and you're thinking, well, that's, a million light years away, so that thing must have exploded a million years ago? That doesn't make sense. Okay, God created the sun, moon, and stars to give light on the earth. That was their purpose, and to mark the seasons, okay? And it was so, suggests that they fulfilled their role immediately. The stars produced light which traveled through space and reached Earth instantaneously. Okay, go look this up tonight. It's a 15-minute video. Okay, why no one has measured the one-way speed of light. It's just a convention that we use. Okay, this is the James Webb Space Telescope when it's being made. It is huge, massive, bigger than the Hubble. The Hubble Space Telescope just could only go up so far and gave us great pictures. Okay, they actually even fixed the Hubble Space Telescope because there was a piece broken, not working, so they went up there in the space station. The astronauts climbed out and went and did a little repair. Okay, this thing they can't repair because it went even farther out. So if it breaks, you're out of luck. Okay, this is a demonstration of what it would look like flying around up in space. James Webb Space Telescope. This is just a couple years ago. Okay, the picture on the left is from the Hubble. Picture on the right is from James Webb. You can see the detail is extraordinary. Okay, kind of the whole reason behind all of this research and stuff is so that they can see the dawn of time. They want to see, because in their mindset, the farther out in space you look, the farther out in time you look. So they want to see the remnants of the Big Bang. If they could see 13 billion years away, this is their thinking, then they'd be seeing cosmic dawn, they call it. Okay? The top is the Hubble, the bottom is the James Webb, and that's the same nebula they're looking at, the big eye in the sky. Now there was predictions. Before they launched the James Webb, they made predictions. The secular predictions were there's going to be fewer galaxies far away, because that's their theory. The galaxies hadn't formed yet. Okay, in a biblical perspective, we're going to see lots of them. Why would we not see lots of them? God created all of them. Okay? They're going to see low mass and clumpy galaxies that aren't fully spiraled yet because they're not fully formed. That's what they're going to see. Okay? Biblical point of view, you're going to see fully formed galaxies because God created everything. All the galaxies on day 4. The light got here instantly. The farthest galaxies, that's where we're going to see those population 3 stars. James Webb is going to see one. We know it because they're out there somewhere. Okay? And the farthest galaxies are going to have just the population 1 and 2 stars. We're not going to see any population 3 stars because the Big Bang did not happen. We're not going to see those things. Okay? And then Dr. James Lyle, he predicted before this thing launched into space, he said, this is what the secularists are going to say when the data comes back. And now he's going out on a limb. Like his whole reputation and everything is on the line by him publishing these before it's even launched. He publishes these predictions. He says that they are going to say, Webb discovers that galaxies formed much earlier than previously thought. That's how confident he is in the Bible. Okay. Now, what did we see? First of all, let me talk about spiral galaxies real quick. so that you know why they're important. Okay, these spiral galaxies wind up. Okay, they rotate differentially, like the inner parts are moving faster than the outer arms are. Okay, like on a track, you're running a race, the inner ones don't have as far to go. Okay, so they're winding up. And angular momentum says, and I think it was Dr. James Lisle that ran this program, that in less than 1 billion years, sounds like a long time, but remember, supposedly 13.8 billion years have gone by. In less than 1 billion years, they'd be wrapped beyond recognition because they're constantly wrapping themselves up. Okay? Now remember, millions of years and evolutionists, they have these rescuing devices. So how is it that these spiral galaxies are still here? Well, there's a lot of blue stars out there, right? So in the arms of these galaxies, they say, they call it the spiral wave density theory, I think. That's where stars are forming. So as these arms collapse in on themselves, because they're winding so fast, new stars are created right there in the arm. That's their theory. Has it ever been seen? No, never. If you read something that says that scientists have seen a star forming, they have not. They have not seen, nobody ever has seen a star forming. Okay, they've seen blue stars, which they know are young, because otherwise they'd burn out of fuel. So you know what they say? The blue stars are young. Well, yeah, they're young, they're 6,000 years old. Just like the red stars and the yellow stars and all the stars are 6,000 years old. Okay, so here is a picture from the James Webb Telescope. If you can see, all of those little specks of light, those are not just stars. Those are galaxies with billions of stars each. Can you even comprehend the massiveness of the universe? That's why it says that the heavens declare the glory of God. We don't declare the glory of God. The heavens declare the glory of God. Every single speck is a galaxy with billions of stars. Okay, fully formed spiral galaxies. This is what the James Webb says, or saw, and sent the pictures back. They were amazed, right? So what did they say? Galaxies started forming much earlier than many astronomers previously thought. Because the James Webb can see way out there, and it looks phenomenal. Okay, nothing but spiral galaxies fully formed the way God made them. Okay, here is our first video.
Just how old is the universe? Well, it doesn't have an expiration tag, but we can make some estimates by looking at things in our universe, like the moon. As the moon orbits the Earth, its gravity pulls on the oceans, causing tides. And as the tides pull on the moon, they cause it to move about 1.5 inches away from the Earth each year. That means that 6,000 years ago, the moon would have been about 800 feet closer to the Earth. Not a problem. But if the Earth and moon were over 4 billion years old, then they would have been touching, and that wouldn't have been good. So the moon shows that the universe is several thousand years old. That makes sense when we also look at comets. They lose large amounts of material each time they pass around the sun, so they wouldn't even be around after billions of years. And the inner regions of spiral galaxies rotate pretty fast. If the galaxies and the universe altogether were billions of years old, they'd be too twisted up to look like they do now. So everywhere we look in the universe, we see evidence that shows that what the Bible says about its age is consistent, and that the heavens really do declare the glory of the Lord.
Okay, this is our spiral galaxy. This is the Milky Way, just for a picture of that. If you go up in the mountains, you can see that. This is a rendition of what the Milky Way would look like with all the stars labeled, because they've they've named all of these things. So let's zoom in on that yellow circle. And then if you can see right here, the solar system, you are here. Here's a map. You are here. That's our sun right there. incomprehensible. We cannot comprehend the size of the universe. Okay, here is a rendition of all of the stars, not all of them, but a few of the stars in our Milky Way. Our sun, you can't even see it, it's not really even on here, but it would be a little tiny point right there. This is 5 billion suns across, this big guy. Okay? These are huge, massive, massive objects that God created on day 4, 6,000 years ago. Okay, here's a schematic of our solar system, and it fits better on the slide going sideways. Okay, so Earth and Moon are here. This is our sun. Just for size comparison, you can see we're these tiny little things right here. Look at how humongous these are. Okay, huge. Our universe is massive. Okay, here's a quote. There are likely tens of billions of Earth-like planets in our Milky Way galaxy. In fact, the nearest Earth-like planet may be only 12 light years away. And with a universe of hundreds of billions of galaxies, our entire universe must contain billions of Earth-like planets. It is completely made up. But this is what they're trying to do, because if they can find another Earth with aliens on it, they can get God out of the picture. That's the goal. Okay, but what do we know from Scripture? God created the earth. He who created the heavens, he is God. He who fashioned and made the earth. He founded it. He did not create it to be empty, but formed it to be inhabited. Okay, he made the earth super, super special. They call it the Goldilocks planet because it is so intricately created for life to happen. The tilt of the earth is just right for seasons, doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold. The orbit, remember the picture where we are orbiting? So the orbit is just the right distance from the sun, a little closer, we'd all die, a little farther away, we'd all die. There is something about the earth that is incredibly intricately designed because God created it for life. That's what the Bible says. He created it to be inhabited. Not like all of the other planets in our solar system. They were not created for life. They're not going to find life on Mars. How do I know that? Because the Bible says he created Earth to be inhabited, not any other planet. Okay? The ancient cultures thought that they were trying to figure out what the Earth was. Now, they haven't seen the Earth from space like we have. Okay? They came up with all kinds of crazy ideas, right? To them, it's not crazy that something's holding the Earth up. Or maybe it's floating on water. Because you can imagine something floating in water. You've seen things float in water. So that might make sense. We're just floating on water in our universe. Okay? In Job, it says, he spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. Now, Job was written long before they came, they were coming up with these ideas. So when you're reading Job 2,000 years ago, you'd be like, he suspends it over nothing? Well, that doesn't make sense. That must be wrong. How could God suspend the earth over nothing? Okay, well, the astronauts see that. The earth is just suspended over nothing. We're just on a ball over nothing. We're just suspended over nothing, just like the Bible says. Okay, in Job 26, it says, he has inscribed a circle on the surface of the waters at the boundary of light and darkness. Now, that line is called a terminator line between light and darkness. The only way to get a circle for a terminator is with a spherical planet. The earth is not flat. It's a sphere. Okay? In Genesis, it says, this is day 2. Let there be an expanse, and the Greek word is rakia, or Hebrew, between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the rakia and separated the water under the rakia from the waters above it. And it was so. God called the expanse rakia, the expanse sky. So rakia means expanse. That's what the word means. Okay, we know that. However, The science of the time thought that we were living in a dome, okay? Kind of like that movie that the guy was in a dome, okay, and the stars were just placed on it. And here is a famous picture from 1888, and you can see the guy peeking out of the dome, okay? So the science of this time said the sky was a solid sphere and the stars were just on top of it. This is what they thought. The Greek Septuagint, 2,300 years old, they translated rakia into stereoma when they did the translation because they thought it was a hard surface. And then later on, they translated that word into firmamentum, indicating it's firm, okay? Rakia means expanse. It doesn't mean something solid. But the science of the time, they thought, the scientists that were really smart thought this, okay? Whenever experts of the day, even today, disagree with something in the Bible, just hang in there, because the Bible always turns out to be right. Always. Always. No matter what. Okay, so you can't change the Bible, but science does change. Okay, Dr. Russell Humphreys is a young Earth creationist, super smart guy, and he came up with, he studied the Earth's magnetic field. It's decreasing 5% per century. They've been measuring it since the 1830s, so they know it's been decreasing. It couldn't be more than 20,000 years old. He did the math on this. So what does that tell you? The Earth is less than 20,000 years old. Okay? The magnetic field would crush any kind of life that was here. Okay? After 6,000 years at the present decay rate, he calculated what the magnetic field would be on all of the planets. In 1984, he made these predictions. Okay, they sent the Voyager 2 out, and they were measuring things like the magnetic field of these planets. And he successfully is the only one that predicted the exact magnetic field strength of Uranus and Neptune when it flew past there. Evolutionists, millions of years folks, got it wrong, because in millions of years, there shouldn't be a magnetic field. Okay, so the Earth, this is what they say, the dynamo theory is their rescuing device. Remember, they always have to have a rescuing device. They say there's an unknown mechanism that regenerates the magnetic field way down deep in the Earth when it dies down. And then it regenerates it again. And then it regenerates it again. And again. And again. Just like the comets. We're going to talk about that in a sec. Okay, Mercury. We're going to go through the planets pretty quickly. Mercury's magnetic field is young. Dr. Humphreys predicted this. The Mariner spacecraft went up there in 1974, so he made the calculations. He already knew the magnetic strength, but his calculations worked for it. Okay. Mercury's high density cannot be explained with slow, gradual models. Okay, it's too hot, too dense. There's an iron core. So here's their rescuing device. Billions of years ago, a large object crashed into Mercury, stripping away its less dense material and leaving behind the high-density planet we see today. Was that observed? No. It's a story made up. That's their rescuing device. Well, it could have happened. Well, yeah, maybe. Venus is spinning backwards. Now, if everything exploded, everything should be spinning the same way, right? The nebular hypothesis, as a nebula spired inwards, all the resulting planets should rotate in the same direction. What's their rescuing device for why this is? Billions of years ago, a large object crashed into Venus at just the right angle and reversed the direction of it. Okay, Mars. First of all, they think there was a global flood on Mars. There's not water. Okay, which one do you think would be more likely to have a global flood, the Earth or Mars? Right? They say there was a global flood on Mars, but not the Earth, which is, 70% water. Okay, Mars had a thick atmosphere in the past and global oceans because it had a global flood on Mars. What's their rescuing device? Billions of years ago, a large object crashed into Mars, stripping away the atmosphere and leaving behind a thin atmosphere we see today. All right? The gas giants, Jason, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Jason are all the big giant gas giants. They have an internal heat that radiates more heat than they receive from the sun. So if they were billions of years old, they would have run out of fuel, just like the blue stars would have. Okay, Jupiter radiates twice as much energy. Okay, Saturn radiates twice as much energy, but a cool thing about Saturn is they can measure the rings are disappearing. The rings are like little tiny rocks all around it, and they're falling into Saturn. So we shouldn't have rings on Saturn in 1,000,000 years. Somebody did the calculations. In 1,000,000 years, they'll all be gone. You won't have any rings on Saturn. Uranus, this was one of the ones that Dr. Humphreys predicted the magnetic field of it in 1984. In 1986, the Voyager went past it. Lo and behold, his predictions are right. It's 6,000 years old. Okay, Neptune, same thing. In 1990, that Voyager spacecraft finally got to Neptune, and lo and behold, the creationist predictions, that's how you do science. You have a theory, you test it. He had a theory, he predicted the magnetic field, he tested it, it was accurate. Okay, Pluto, no longer a planet, but there's a lot fewer craters on it than they thought there should be. It's a lot smoother than they thought it should be because it's way out there getting bombarded. Okay, but what's their rescuing device for Pluto's not having craters all over it? Well, billions of years ago, a large object crashed into it. This is their rescuing device. Who are you to say that that didn't happen? Okay, just like the comets. I do have comets in here. Okay, so comets are frozen gas and rocks, and that little video touched on it just for a little bit. They lose material when they orbit the sun. Every time they orbit the sun, they lose a little bit of material because they're frozen, right? So sun is hot. That's what you see coming off the end of the comet. So they have a relatively short life. They've done the math, and they run out of material in about 100,000 years. Okay? The frequency of the comets has been getting smaller and smaller. It's decreasing with time. That indicates a young universe. Okay? Comets are a problem for millions of years, a huge problem. So they study it, and they're like, I don't know why there's comets. There shouldn't be comets after 100,000 years. They have a rescuing device. Dr. Oort, that's why it's called the Oort cloud, because he wants to be famous, comes up with this theory. Now it's in all of the textbooks that there is an Oort cloud. You ask a child, how are comets made? And they'll say, because of the Oort cloud. Okay? Apparently there's an Oort cloud somewhere way out there because comets are still coming into our universe. That's their rescuing device. They think comets are still here. The Earth is, 4 billion years old. How are comets still here? Well, there must be a way that comets are coming in. You can't detect it. You can't measure it. You can't see it. You can't tell me that it's not there. This is their rescuing device. And now it's in textbooks as science to indoctrinate people, children, that the Earth is millions of years old. Okay, here's an interesting fact real quick. In Job, it's talking about the constellations. In Job 38, can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Do you know the laws of heaven? Okay, here is Orion, and then the Pleiades is the 7 sisters. This is how you can find it. Everyone can find Orion. You can find the 3 stars. Those are blue stars, by the way. Can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? God's asking Job if he can hold all those together. Okay, those are moving apart. But you can't tell that. When the Bible was written, you couldn't tell that. Okay, can you loose the cords of Orion? Can you make those 3 stars become looser, his belt? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Well, here's it close up, and there's 2 of them that are drifting together, and one of them's drifting away. We can tell that now. We couldn't tell that just by looking. Okay, very, very interesting. When the Bible touches on science, it is always 100% correct, never fails. Okay, so this whole series, Setting the Record Straight, Evolution in Millions of Years, is a story that has been created to get God out of science, because science are smart people, right? These PhD scientists, they're smarter than me, they're smarter than all of us. They've gone to school, they've studied it, but their worldview will not allow them to change their theory. They come up with rescuing devices that convince us that they're smart, they know, okay? But evolution in millions of years opposes the Bible and it opposes science. Okay, the evidence, I love this quote. The evidence for the Bible's divine authorship is certainly substantial. But in the end, there is only one argument that can prove to us that the Bible is true and authoritative in our lives: the work of the Holy Spirit in our hearts and minds. Okay? You can evidence somebody to death. You can say, where are the monopoles? Where's the antimatter? Why are there still comets? You could go through all of the evidence. You know, all of the fossils, all of the flood. You can go through all the evidence like I've done in this series. That's not going to change somebody's worldview. It's not going to change the way they look at the world, the way they interpret the evidence. Okay? You can present this to people, like to your family members, to your children, to your grandchildren. Okay? They need to know the truth of science supports the Bible. And then the Holy Spirit opens your eyes, and all of a sudden, everywhere you look, it's creation. Okay? That was my story. I was millions of years, evolution, you know, I'm hardcore science in graduate school, learning about genetics and all this stuff. And then I came to a place where I'm like, wait a minute, how is the Bible true? I had never really looked into it. Okay, that long ago, there was not the internet where I could look into it. You guys can look into it. Your grandkids can look into it. Okay, research it so that you know that you know that you know, because it builds your faith. And that's the whole point of this whole series, right? So that you won't be deceived by fine-sounding arguments. And that's all evolution in millions of years is fine-sounding arguments. That's it. So we can go to questions now.